Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 17th session of the online Optom Learning Series. And today we have Optom Puneet with us. Optom Puneet has finished his bachelor's from the MET University, India. And currently he is working as a vision therapist. His specialization is in vision therapy. He is also a co-founder and CEO at the CureC Vision Therapy Solutions. During his bachelor's, he has also developed a mobile application known as the OptoCal, which helps practitioners to calculate contact lens calculations and transpositions. I think you all must go and download this app. Everybody needs that fast app to do some calculations. Thank you for that. He has also received appreciation letter from the Optometric Council of India for his various activities and awareness projects. And he's also an active member of the COVD and the Neuro Optometric Rehabilitation Association, NORA. So he is going to talk to us about amblyopia and why we should not say no to amblyopia. So thank you very much, Puneet, and go ahead with your session.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the kind words and your love always. So, without much delay, let's begin. The topic for today is don't say no to amblyopia. So, before beginning, I want to tell you all this is not just a presentation, it is a journey where we will learn about the story of amblyopia. We have to visualize about amblyopia, only then we can understand what the condition is and how are we going to treat this. So, first, what if I tell you our eyes function just like a camera? Just like a camera captures a picture and then we can see this. In the similar way, our eyes capture images and our brain interprets them to make us see them. So in this case, here we have two eyes. Suppose someone went to see Taj Mahal. So one eye captures a clear picture of Taj Mahal. Okay. Then the second eye captures a blurred picture of Taj Mahal. What normally occurs is two pictures are equally clear and the brain and visual cortex then fuses them as one to provide us with stereopsis and a single image, binocular single vision. But in this case, we have one clear picture of Taj Mahal and the other eye is capturing a blurred picture of Taj Mahal. So what will happen? The most common symptom being by the patient would be double image because the brain and the visual cortex is unable to fuse them as single picture. Now, if this continues for a longer period of time, the brain and the visual cortex, what would they do? They will take only the clearer picture and neglect the blurred picture from the second eye, which we call as the lazy eye. So in this case, the patient will never complain you about any symptom and he might not be even knowing if he has any ocular condition also. So it is our duty and responsibility to screen for each patient for binocular vision. Only 6 is not our target. We need binocularity. We need the patient to be happy and free from. This is one of my favorite quotes. There was a great philosopher called Hippocrates who in 450 BC said that when the patient sees nothing and the doctor sees nothing, the diagnosis is amblyopia. So amblyopia still remains as a diagnosis of exclusion. Why exclusion? Because when the patient comes to us, we do all the tests, we perform comprehensive examination, we see the fundus and we perform all other tests. Then we conclude that okay, this person has no other ocular condition, still his visual acuity and quality of vision is not improving. So he's a amblyopic, and then we do the further investigations for amblyopia. So what is amblyopia? If I ask anybody this question, the most common answer I get is it is lazy eye. Well, it is much beyond lazy eye. It is a visual cacophony of deficits in contrast sensitivity, accommodation, spatial localization, that is stereo acuity, then crowding, fixation. The patient would be having a difficulty in fixating to an object, then attention, ocular motility, motion perception called saccades and pursuits, then temporal processing and visual acuity loss, of course. So this is taken up by Esper Lee in 2000. He provided us with this definition, which makes us to understand amblyopia in a better way. So, is there any solution? What to be done in such kind of patients? So earlier, what we used to do is patching. So we recommended patching for better eye. In that case, the most common and drastic complaint by the patient is comprehensive embarrassment. Suppose if someone tells me to patch my better eye and go play, go watch something, and go meet my friends, go to college, I won't do it because it is much more of a cosmetic embarrassment to us. Then the second one is difficulty in daily life tasks. Why that? Because we have patched the better eye and the amblyopic eye of course lacks quality of vision, so that makes it difficult to do and perform the regular tasks. The third one is extremely slow result. What I mean by extremely slow result is when we do patching, we usually follow up the patient after 6 months, after 1 year and 2 years sufficiently. Why? Because the patching does not gives you the fast result. It gives very slow results. Suppose someone is doing patching for regularly for 1 year, 2 years, then we can see okay he's improving to 2 lines or 1 line. The next one is risk of reversal. What is risk of reversal? By risk of reversal, I mean whenever the patient stops patching, whatever improvement he has achieved till that date can be reversed, will be gotten back to the same condition again. So when we look at the overall aspect of patching, it does not provide any treatment because whenever you quit patching, it goes back to the same condition again. So one cannot go for lifetime patching. Na? Then patient compliance. Patient compliance is a major issue because majority of the amblyoptic patients you will administer are used to be children. So children are not much friendly to use patches and to follow your instructions like this. They need something fun. They need something which does not hinder in their activities. So, what is the solution? The solution is vision therapy. How vision therapy? Vision therapy is already being used to treat many other disorders, such as strabismus called squint, then accommodation disorders, learning disability, convergence and divergence disorders. So now we know what the problem is. So let's see how big the problem is. So when we consider prevalence of amblyopia, as per researchers, 3 to 5% of global population suffers from amblyopia. So if the world population is 7.7 billion, the 4% of that is 308 million patients. So that's a large number of patients waiting for us. And when we talk about the army that is treating them, the vision therapist and the vision therapy specialist around the world, well, that is only 5% of eye care practitioners provide vision therapy. So we need to create the army, we need a bigger army to treat this patient. These patients are waiting for us. You can yourself imagine 308 million patients, and only 5% of eye care practitioners know about vision therapy and they practice vision therapy. So during this lecture, I want you all to understand whatever is being taught, and if there's any doubt or any issue, you can write that down in the chat box. We will answer them all in the end so that you can start practicing vision therapy. Now, coming back to amblyopia and its classification, it is classified by American Academy of Optometry as follows. First is strabismic. Strabismic means the patient is having squint. So if the squint is constant and non-alternating, so it comes under strabismic amblyopia. Next one we have is refractive amblyopia. Under refractive, we have conditions, we have specified it further. First one becomes anisometropic amblyopia. So anisometropic refractive amblyopia, that means the patient has a difference in refractive error of one eye to the fellow eye. Then comes the meridional refractive amblyopia. So in the meridional part, if there is a cylindrical component and astigmatic component that is hindering with the vision and making the patient amblyopic, that is under the meridional amblyopia. Next one which comes is isometropic amblyopia. When the refractive error is same between the two eyes, but still there is no improvement, it comes as isometropic amblyopia. Note, please note that amblyopia can be unilateral as well as bilateral. Next, we have visual deprivation. Under visual deprivation, first is media opacities. So what I mean by media opacity, suppose somebody is having cataract or any corneal haze, that comes under media opacity because if there are no rays reaching back to the retina itself, then how can we consider it not to be amblyopic? Next one is ptosis. If someone has drooping of the eyelid, then if there's a issue with the eyelid, we cannot treat that by treating the fundus. So we need to first go to the ptosis and treat that. Next one is occlusion. So under occlusion, as I mentioned earlier, with occlusion, suppose a patient was following patching for a large period of time. Okay, so in that case, the better eye which was patched, the better eye which was occluded, it develops amblyopia. Even the better eye, the sound eye or the fellow eye develops amblyopia, which we call as reverse amblyopia. Now, what are the severity? How do we classify on the basis of best corrected visual acuity? So first one is we have classified them as mild, moderate, and severe. First being the mild. Mild one is 20 by 25 to 20 by 40. That is 6 by 7.5 to 6 by 12. If you have a patient whose visual acuity even after full possible correction is uh, not improving at all, and it is ranging between 6.7.5 to 6 by 12, then it is mild amblyopic patient. If you have a patient that is whose visual acuity, best corrected visual acuity, falls between 20 by 40 to 20 by 100, which corresponds to 6 by 12 to 6 by 30, that is moderate amblyopic patient. And any patient with best corrected visual acuity beyond 20 by 100 to 20 by 400, that is 3 by 60 to 6 by 120, that is severe amblyopic patient. This is given by PEDIC study done in 2003. Next, how suppose I have a patient coming up, how will I identify this is an amblyopic patient? I need to follow some investigations, I need to do some testing before I can conclude and diagnose this as amblyopia. So first one comes as basic testing. Basic testing is the regular testing you do for each and every patient. First one is history taking. We have to, I will go to each topic one by one. I'm just giving you a summary beforehand. Then visual acuity, cycloplegic refraction, keratometry, dilated fundus examination to see if there are not any fundus disorders. Then monocular test, which includes tests for fixation, ocular accommodation, contrast sensitivity, and then the binocular test, which are red reflex tests, often referred as Bruckner's test. Next, we have sensory fusion, stereopsis, ocular alignment, and motor fusion. Then strength of suppression and visual efficiency. So this is a huge load of investigation. So I will just begin by one and we will understand it further. So first one is history taking. History is of utmost importance because I conclude history is the part which makes you diagnose half of the condition. Okay, so first you have to be very specific in the history, and even if the patient is not telling you any answers, you need to keep pushing, you need to keep the answers coming, you need to make the patient comfortable, because majority of patients are going to be children, and you need to be very soft and kind with children. Whenever you are dealing with children, be very soft and friendly with them, only then they will answer. So first one is history of a family history of amblyopia. Ask the parents or the guardians if they had any amblyopia or they ever took any treatment for that. Next, if the patient itself is earlier diagnosed as amblyopia, what was the previous treatment being given to the patient? And if there are any developmental lags, what are the developmental milestone? When does the child begin talking and when was he started walking? Next is earlier compliance. Earlier compliance means, suppose if the earlier the patient was following patching, so how was he patching, how was the response, how was the patient following the therapy? Next is age at diagnosis. When was the first time that amblyopia was diagnosed in that particular patient? We need to get that also. And if he was following patching, we need to get the details for how much hours he was patching, is he regular or not, and what was the compliance. We need to take this all into study and note them. Next, we have visual acuity. So many of you are wondering, how do we take visual acuity in pre-verbal? So this is the most common question from the students. First one is, we got preferential looking test. Whenever the patient ranging from 0 to 3 years, we go for the preferential looking test. We see how is the patient following a target, how is the patient looking at something, how is it preferring. Second one being optokinetic nystagmus. I bet this many of you have seen in your clinics. In the optokinetic nystagmus, the patient is not asked. In fact, he is observed if he is following any pattern or not. Next one is LIA and HOTV matching. So children are great at memorizing the pictures rather than the names or numbers or letters. They need pictures more than letters. So if you give them LIA symbols, HOTV pictures, so they will just arrange them. They will try to match them. So whenever you see, this is a great method. If the child is around 3 years, only then it can work. Under that, it is not very much cooperative by the patient. Next one is verbal, when the child is more than 3 years and he can answer all your questions. So in that visual acuity, you can either go for illiterate E, Landau C, or ETDRS chart, Snellen's chart, LIA symbols, and HOTV. So there is no bar after that. Coming to diffraction, first we have to do retinoscopy because retinoscopy will answer many of your queries. After you get your objective refraction done, you will go for subjective acceptance. What is the patient currently accepting? You will try to give your best possible correction and see how much the visual acuity improves. After that, you see if the patient is not improving further, you will go for a cycloplegic refraction. Then after the cycloplegic refraction, you see, okay, there's nothing else. It is just near to amblyopia. I have to diagnose it further. So you will first go to keratometry and see if there are not any changes on the corneal curvature also. So this is the most common test. Everyone was asking me about how to do this, and I have tried to conclude this faster. So it is performed using a direct ophthalmoscope. The procedure includes, first we have to stand at 1 meter or at least 3 feet away from the patient, and then we shine the ophthalmoscope's light and tell the patient to look at the light. You can turn off the room lights to minimize the distractions and compare the brightness and color of right reflex between the right and the left eye. So in this image, if you can see, the right eye of the patient shows a normal fundus with a normal glow, whereas in the left eye, it is kind of pale, it is brighter. So the finding, if it gets brighter and pale reflex, it is either strabismic or anisometropic eye. So this is a great tool in identifying and diagnosing amblyopia. This is called Bruckner's test, also called as red reflex test. Next one is motor evaluation. So we need to see how is the ocular motility working of that particular patient. So first we will go with a broad edge test. We will make the patient see and gaze in all the 9 gazes. If it is perfect, we will note the findings. If not, we will note whichever muscle was not working perfectly. Then the next which comes is ocular alignment. Under ocular alignment, we got cover test and PBCT. So what is cover test? Cover test is often categorized further as cover uncover test, alternate cover test. So these are used to identify if there's any tropia or phoria present in the patient's eyes. And if we see any tropia present or phoria present, we will then go for PBCT. If orthophoria, there is not much requirement for PBCT. So PBCT is nothing but prism bar cover test, where we will try to find out the magnitude of that strabismus only. This is always done with best possible refractive correction. I have seen many students making this mistakes that they do not provide the refraction first and directly go for the ocular alignment. So this does not work that way. You have to provide the best possible correction and then only you have to see what is the patient's condition for strabismus. Next one we have here is sensory evaluation. So what is sensory evaluation? Sensory evaluation includes the patient is he having stereopsis or not. So under stereopsis is nothing but our ability to guess the depth and see what's in our front and what's in the back. So it is further categorized as global stereopsis and local stereopsis. Global is based on random based. What is random? These are just random dots spread over a particular surface or card or picture, and then the patient has to identify a particular pattern using green and blue filter lenses, which are provided by the test provider itself. This is called global stereopsis, which is based on random dot test. Next is local stereopsis. Under local stereopsis, we have contour based. So why contour based? So as you have seen the Titmus fly test, in that we also got the Titmus circle test. If you look at that, the contour differs. which one is upper, which one is not in the 3D view. The patient has to diagnose, have to identify that, and only then we can diagnose and see how much is the stereopsis of that particular patient, how much is the stereoacuity. Next is both for dot test. This has to be done both distance and near. Both for dot test is the most important case if you have any amblyopic patient in your clinic, because it provides you with a description whether the patient is having diplopia, suppression, or normal fusion. You can do this in both the condition, one photopic under normal light and then scotopic under dim light. Why in both the conditions? Sometimes the patient can see better in the scotopic, that is under dim light, but under the normal room light, the patient cannot perform well and cannot interpret the both for the test perfectly. So this is the Bagolini stereo lens test. So what does it use? It uses a torch, pen light, and a Bagolini stereo lens. In that, as you can see in the image above, the view of the left eye has a slanted line, a vertical slanted line, and the view of the right eye has a vertical slanted line, but in the opposite direction. So what should it do? If the eyes are working perfectly and there is a fusion and there is normal retinal correspondence, the patient should be able to see two lines intersecting at center, as I have shown in the image A. Then, if only one line is visible to the patient, as in the image E, then it is known as suppression, because the patient is getting input from only one eye. The second eye, we are not getting any input, so it comes under suppression. So, if there is any small gap at the center, as you can see in the image D, it comes under central suppression scotoma. So in the central suppression scotoma, we are not able, the patient is not able to see at the center, but he in the rest of the image looks fine. The all it performs and fuses a proper cross, but there's no particular line or any cross or any intersection at the center. That is central suppression scotoma. And if you see two lines seen but not intersect at center, this comes under diplopia. So whenever using this test, you have to ask the patient to draw whatever he is seeing, and then you can identify, okay, the patient is undergoing this condition. This is a great test, and the patient is quite involved in this, so children usually love this kind of test. Next, we have strength of suppression. What do I mean by strength of suppression? How much is the suppression? We have to quantify that also. It is not same for each eye, like, okay, this patient is also suppressed and this is also suppressed. No, we have to quantify how much is the suppression. And time to time, we have to see is it improving or not. So for that, using the Bagolini lenses, we use a neutral density filter, NDF, which is placed in front of good eye, sound eye, to reduce its contrast. As you can see the image of a hand holding the neutral density filter. It has various different contrast levels, okay, which is called as NDF range. So it is used to reduce the contrast of good eye, the sound eye, until the patient starts to appreciate the streak from amblyopic eye. So as you can see in the previous condition, if there was a suppression, I will go back. If there was a suppression, the patient is showing an image just like E. In the E, there's only one line is visible. There's no input from the other eye. So what we are doing, we are using a neutral density filter in front of good eye, the sound eye, make its contrast poorer so that the second eye gives its input, the brain gets input from the amblyopic eye. Then if whenever the patient is seeing the intensity of light same from the amblyopic eye as well as the sound eye. The endpoint is if the intensity of light seen by amblyopic eye is same or slightly stronger than fellow eye, this is the endpoint. This is where we have to stop and not increase the NDF further. So at that point, we then quantify how much is the suppression also. As I told you earlier, this has an NDF range. So if the NDF range is suppose we go to 6, then it has suppression of 0.6 logMAR. And if we consider this to transmittance, so the first one, it is usually 50% transmittance, and the NDF range of 18 is having 0.1% transmittance. That is a huge contrast in front of the good eye. So in the severity cases, you will get to see large NDF range, and in the poorer cases, in the easy and mild and moderate cases, you will see only a range between 6 to 9. Okay, so there are other significant tests also. So which I have not included, but I will tell you because these are all important whenever diagnosing amblyopia. So first one is accommodation assessment. As in the first slide, I have told you about the definition of amblyopia. It hinders with your accommodation also. So we have to quantify how much is the accommodative facility, what is the amplitude of accommodation, and we have to do MEM retinoscopy, monocular estimation method. The patient is asked to read the letters shown at the retinoscope card. Next is fixation preference. What I mean by fixation preference is central study movement of monocular fixation. And then the second one is four prism diopters base out test, which you are all aware of. Next is reading ability. So we need to see, as I told you, majority of patients are children. We need to see and identify how's the patient performing, is there any difficulty he's getting while reading or writing. So we need to see the fluency and ability of that particular patient to read a paragraph. We will give them a paragraph to read, we will give them the near chart to read and see if he is stumbling upon words or having any difficulty, because the patient of this condition usually suffer with crowding effect. In the crowding effect, the patient cannot identify any object if it is presented in a crowded manner, it is presented in a large number of objects. Next one becomes vergence assessment. So we have to see, and the basic one, the most important one is NPC, the near point of convergence. Using a ref rule, you can perform that and you can conclude, okay, is this patient having any abnormality or not? The next one in the second level becomes the PFV, positive fusional vergence and negative fusional vergence. So we need this for vergence and accommodation assessment, as well as we have to see the fixation preference and reading ability of the patient. So far we have studied a lot about amblyopia. We got to know what is amblyopia. We now know how much big the problem is, how to diagnose, what are the tests that needs to be done. So what is our goal? What we need to do? Our goal should be to restore binocularity and improve vision. Our goal should not be stuck only to visual acuity. Our goal should remain to restore the binocularity of patient. I remember a quote, a beautiful quote, that is, God gave us two eyes not to have diplopia but to have stereopsis. So our goal is to, what is our goal? A happy patient is the goal of vision therapy. The patient should be satisfied and free from any symptoms. So what are the management includes establishing optimal refractive correction. We have to give the best possible refractive correction to the patient. Then we have to improve monocular visual function. The visual functioning of the amblyopic eye, we have to improve that first. Then we have to improve the fusion with the second eye. Both of eye should work as perform as a team. Only then they will be free from any symptoms and the system will improve further. Then we have to obtain binocular vision in free space. After that, we need a patient to give some supplement. What is supplement? By supplement, I mean a home therapy program. Home therapy program, the patient can easily access any therapy and a range of exercises selected by the practitioner at their home itself. The patient does not have to go to the clinic daily, and even the practitioner has some kind of relief in this. So, as I told you about active vision therapy, so what are the possible chances of correction by using active vision therapy in amblyopia? First is optics. Under pleoptics, it is used for active stimulation of fovea to overcome eccentric fixation. Patients with amblyopia often have eccentric fixation. So, what does pleoptics do? It uses intense density of light, and that intense light is being thrown to the eye, to the outer part of the fovea. And then after peripheral fovea gets stimulated, we can see how is the patient performing after a range of around 7 minutes of play optics. The next one which comes is cam vision stimulation. What is cam vision stimulation? It is nothing but just the amblyopic eye is stimulated by slow rotating around one cycle per minute, high contrast square wave grating. It has a grating which consists of many square of contrast. Then it is rotating continuously and patient sees them for around 7 minutes. After that, they claim that it includes stimulate the cortical neurons. Next is syntonic phototherapy. This is of very much popularity nowadays, but it is nothing very advanced. It is developed in the earlier days itself, and right now it does not have much of the implications in the patient also. Why? Because it is dealing with application of selected vision light, often yellow and orange light frequency through the eyes. It throws a variety and a range of a frequency of light through the eyes and claim to improve the visual acuity of that particular patient. Next, we have perceptual learning. What is perceptual learning? It employs repeatedly practicing a visual discrimination task. Suppose the patient is given a task consisting of many objects, consisting of many cereals mix. So the patient has to separate the different kind of cereals from that. Okay. Next is software-based vision therapy. This is designed to improve hand-eye coordination, the saccades and pursuits movement, as well as contrast, visual acuity, and crowding and visual memory also. So it now also includes perceptual learning under the software-based vision therapy. The patient can easily perform these exercises at their home, office, or at clinic with a doctor. Next is pharmacological therapy. This is right now abandoned because this does not give proper results and has not much of use. Also, interferes with the it is interfering with pharmacology of the patient. So this is nowadays abandoned. What it consisted of was a combination of levodopa and citicoline. It either accents or reactivates the visual system's sensitive period of neural plasticity. So this, due to having many disadvantages, this was discontinued. And right now, nobody is prescribing pharmacological therapy for amblyopia. So we need to focus on what is active vision therapy and how we can give our patient the binocular vision and how we can improve his quality of life and the quality of vision of that particular patient. So before going further, as I said, these are all the options we have in active vision therapy. So right now, considering all of these options, when I tell you the software-based VT is much of importance nowadays because it removes hassle from the practitioners and it provides benefits to the patient. It is proven to improve hand-eye coordination as well as saccades pursuit, contrast, and all the other factors that are hindered due to amblyopia. So we will study about the software-based vision therapy next. So which includes there are many software for vision therapy. I will name them one by one, and which is the first one is as I have mentioned the CureC. It uses random dot stereogram (RDS) modules. We have earlier also studied about random dot stereogram, which was used for diagnosing. But in this, we have RDS random dot stereogram modules being used for therapeutic purposes. The patient goes through the modules as an exercise, and when he completes those exercise, the patients improve in stereo acuity, the patient improve in the vergence exercise. Next is dichoptics principle. What is dichoptics? Dichoptics is nothing but just the use of two colors. Here we have used red and blue as the primary colors. Why? Because it provides a great variety and a range of wavelength between the two colors, so there won't be a mixing of two color by the eyes. And anti-suppression technology. What is anti-suppression technology? It is nothing but that as you can see above, there are the glasses with a blue filter and a red filter. Only the red filter is able to see the red stimulus, and the blue filter is able to see the blue stimulus. And the stimulus come as one by one, just like how we do it in the gym. We get to the dumbbells, and once we lift the dumbbell with right hand, and then with the left hand. So in the same way, we do the same to our eyes as well by using the stimulus. Once we show a red stimulus to the patient, then it is blue, again red and blue. So it is doing nothing but once giving stimulus to the right eye, then left eye, then right eye, then left eye. Overall improving the patient's quality of vision and binocularity. Next is crowding phenomenon. As I said earlier, the crowding is nothing but we have to identify and select a particular object in a huge variety of objects. So the patient usually have difficulty doing this, but over the period of time, the crowding also improves and the patient improves in their visual acuity with it. Next and the most important is individualized and customized contrast threshold. Because the patient, as the first in the first PPT and first line I have said, the patient has difficulty in contrast itself. The contrast reduces to a significant manner, and the amblyopic eye needs to get to individualized contrast to perform the exercises. So we are doing nothing, but in the first and in the beginning of the exercises, we are selecting the contrast by the amblyopic eye, and all the stimulus will then come of the specified contrast only, giving the patient us individualized therapy and faster results. Then why Cursi? I have seriously developed this Cursi because I was using many other softwares, and there were some problems which I was occurring. Some software was not having reports, some software was not available offline, and the one which was offline was not available online. So sometimes the patient complained, I cannot do this. My laptop is lost. You have to charge the again. So, and some other issues which are then it is limited to number of times. Suppose the patient has accidentally clicked on the exercise, it will count it as a session, and then the patient won't be able to try that again. So I have nothing, just concluded all this into a single software and providing some other benefits to the patient and practitioners. One of the greatest issue was price. The price was a major concern for the practitioner as well as the patient. If the practitioner get this as a large and big, huge amount of price, how is we going to increase the army for the embryopic patient? So we have reduced the price significantly for the practitioner only. So all the benefits and all the price range, all the subsidies go to the practitioner. Then it is practitioner's call how much is he going to charge the patient. We made it very feasible and it is available both online and offline. Then it has a daily live updated report of each patient accessible by the practitioner. Suppose I am right now I'm sitting due to a lockdown and some patient is doing exercises at their home, either online or offline. I am getting the input of whatever the performance or whatever the graph reports on that particular patient. How much is he doing the exercises? Is he improving or not? What is the score? What is the time period he's playing the exercises for? Next is unlimited times access for 6 months. For we prepared a complete 6 month patient for every 6 month period for every patient, where each patient gets a complete unlimited times access for 6 months. He can perform the exercise whenever he like for unlimited number of times. And all the controls, all the access are sent to the practitioner. The practitioner is able to control each and every exercise of the patient, making it individualized and customized. So as I told you earlier, I will show you how to start. And so coming to the point, you can register for QRC, get zero cost training for binocular vision evaluation, workup, and QRC dispensing. And then you can start dispensing vision therapy at your practice. We will come to your place, we will visit you, we will provide you training, what all you need to set up in a vision therapy clinic, how are you going to evaluate the patient, how are you going to diagnose the patient. We will provide you all the training and including the counseling and even the initial patient. We do it with ourselves also. And then you can easily start dispensing vision therapy at your practice. We are always available for your support. So this is the philosophy we believe in, that is providing patient with overcorrection in spectacle is not the solution. We have to treat the cause of eye strain or headache by starting vision therapy for the betterment of patient and optimal results. Why am I saying this? Because I see a number of practitioners, whenever a patient complains of asthenopia, instead of taking proper history of asthenopia, they start giving them maximum plus and improving them not further, which is not usually they do not improve by this, but this is not a better way to treat the patient. Instead, we should start vision therapy. Everyone, if he starts vision therapy, then it is an added specialty to your practice, added specialty which not many practitioners are right now doing. So it has a huge scope, and you all can start this. So thank you all for your attention. You can feel free to contact me at this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Puneet. Thank you so much for the exciting talk what we had today on amblyopia, and your focus was more onto how to treat patients and how to be a good vision therapist. So that's very important. Let's take some of the questions which are on the chat. The first question is, what is the role of suppression in amblyopia?
The role of suppression in amblyopia, as in the, we'll just get back. Am I visible now?
Yes,
Okay.
great. Yeah.
So what is the role of suppression in amblyopia? So in the first slide, as I mentioned, if there were two eyes, so both of them showing two pictures. So if for a longer duration of time, the amblyopic eye continues to be like that, the brain and the visual cortex often neglect that eye. That becomes a suppression. The brain neglects that eye, says that I do not want a blurred picture, I do not want a blurred view, I do not want them to have diplopia. You can imagine the kind of headache and the asthenopia the patient experience due to diplopia. So to avoid that, the brain what do it do? It does suppression. It suppresses the amblyopic eye and gives image from only the sound eye. So the patient thinks, okay, it is now working, everything is fine. But until and unless it is diagnosed by an optometrist, he will never encounter if he is even having any problem also.
Yeah, that's right. And any idea about what is the percentages of different type of amblyopia? I mean, in your experience of amblyopia, what type of amblyopia do you see more? Something like that.
The most common amblyopia in our practice, I'm not going by the researches, I do not have that data right now, but according to my own practice, I see more number of anisometropic patients coming rather than strabismic or occlusion. We have more of anisometropic patients, so either meridional. This contributes more to the quantity.
Okay, yeah, okay. And there is something like Spiza bar, SBIZA, and there is neutral density filter. So what
Yeah.
is your take? Which one is better, or is there any comments on that? Because there is
So
one
far,
person asking that. Yeah.
So far, I have not used the Spiza bar, so I may not be able to answer that with much of expertise. I can only tell you how a neutral density filter works because I go with that only. I do not find any
Okay.
issue with it, so I do not shift with it.
Yeah, true. I think you're used to using a neutral density,
Yeah.
and I think there are quite a good papers saying that neutral density filter is good to go to determine. So yeah, I mean you're comfortable with that, so you use that probably.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
right.
we can
Yeah,
quantify that easily also.
yeah, true, true. Yeah, and is there any particular pattern of timing? How many sittings and follow up should be done for the Hedinger brushes exercise?
As per the Siemens, it mentions you to go for the vision therapy and the exercises at least once a week.
Once a week. Okay.
Once a week.
And what about the dichoptic viewing games? Your software is based on this dichoptic phenomenon, right?
Yeah, dichoptics also, because dichoptics is nothing but the use of two colors. So we have used two
Okay.
colors which are red and blue. Again, we provide the glasses, the filter lenses also, which consist of the same red and blue filters. Okay, so red and blue stimulus is coming on the screen of the selected contrast being the of the patient's amblyopic eye. Suppose my amblyopic eye has a 40% contrast only. Okay, and the second eye is working on 100% contrast. Then what we can do is we can manage the contrast setting for each eye, and after that whatever comes on the screen there'll be a red and a blue stimulus one by one. Once there will be red and then there will be blue one stimulus. So the red stimulus being from the right eye, it will work according to the contrast sensitivity of right eye, as we said that at the initial stage, and the blue one for the left eye will work according to contrast sensitivity of that eye. So
Okay.
the dichoptics is nothing but the use of two colors to stimulate two eyes one by one. As I
Yeah.
gave the example of how we do it in the gym using the dumbbells one by one, so that the other eye gets some relaxation period also. It does not focus
True.
continuously.
Yeah. And what about the vision therapy in terms of severity of the condition? Is there different guidelines? Like if the amblyopia is more severe, the vision therapy is different compared to the amblyopia, which is less severe, or do you follow the same pattern of vision therapy for all kinds?
So we follow the same pattern. We go one by one. If there's suppose it has severity and a case which is coming up with there's a case with mild amblyopia and another case with severe amblyopia. So what we will do if we start them both to the same exercise, we will do them to individualize their contrast levels. The severe one will have to see the stimulus at a higher contrast, only then it can appreciate that. So the severe one will take a longer time compared to the mild one, but it will go through the same process. So
Same
there is no
process.
difference in the process. The only the time is a difference.
Yeah. Maybe it takes a longer time to treat, and maybe follow-ups are more frequent,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, that's right. And what is the possible management for reverse amblyopia?
Okay, so under the reverse amblyopia, when we see the patient has used patching and even then the sound eye has developed amblyopia, or even the amblyopic eye which was following the patching again developed amblyopia. So in that case, we shift them to active vision therapy. As I said, active vision therapy other than occlusion, we have other options like pleoptics, or we can go for cam stimulation, Gabor patches also. Gabor patches are nowadays blooming because they're playing with your contrast. So this is not to be done more than 10 minutes, otherwise it will have psychological effects. So it is done under the guidance of a senior optometrist. Only then we can practice that. So there are the advanced modalities. We shift the patient to that one. If there is any reverse amblyopia or a patient who has a history of patching, we shift them to the advanced modalities to make the recovery speeder.
Okay. And how do we detect binocular amblyopia?
Okay, so there are guidelines to detect binocular amblyopia as well, which states that if you have, suppose if the patient having a visual acuity 20 by 50 or worse, when the age was around 3 to 4 years, so it will be a best correction of the amblyopia I'm talking about. If it is the visual acuity ranging 20 by 50 or worse at the age of 3 to 4 in both the eyes, then it will be bilateral amblyopia. If the patient is a little older, and if it is having difficulty even after 20 by 40, okay, or if he can read up to 20 by 30 after the age of 5 years, then it is considered as bilateral amblyopia. Bilateral amblyopia is nothing but both the eyes are not working properly, both the eyes are showing amblyopic symptoms, and both the eyes, the quality of vision in both the eyes are affected. So we need to improve that.
Okay. And is it possible to reveal the estimated cost of the setup for vision therapy, what you have shared with us today?
Uh,
Approximately what is the requirement?
Sir, you can post your email on the chat box. I will get back to you with the quotation.
Probably, I think whoever is interested, you already have his email ID and you already have our email ID as well. So if you can connect either of us, we will definitely get back to you, and he will be the best person to answer what is the requirement and what are the probable estimated costs which we need to, when you want to set up this particular vision therapy setup, right? Okay, thank you. And how is the contrast of the red and blue managed? Is it by the software or?
It is managed by the software. As I said, at the first in the initial setup, the patient is asked to set the contrast settings. Under contrast settings, wearing the anaglyph glasses, red and blue glasses, the patient sets contrast for red color and then the blue color. So it is called as contrast threshold. We set it to a threshold limit. On that, okay, this is the contrast levels of red eye and blue eye. I'm saying red eye and blue eye because it is corresponding to the left and right eye. So as then we set the contrast, and all the exercises are modified according to that contrast only.
Okay, and is there any specific requirement of the laptop or the computer what the patient will use at home, or they can use any computer?
They can use any computer which is working fine. They can either play it online or they can go to the offline mode also. Suppose somebody is not connected to internet, belongs from a rural area, he can download it once and use it for a 6 months period of time.
Okay, so any laptop is okay. There's no specific criteria or you must have this particular laptop. No. Okay, great. And is it because we have a lot of international attendees here? So
Yeah.
is it possible if they are interested, people from non-India, like we have people from Malaysia and Vietnam and Brunei as well as UK. So is it possible that they can also get some details about your software, and is it possible for you to explain to them about the same also?
Definitely, sir. We are already running in more than 6 countries right now, so I can get back to them and provide them with a demo, as well as I will support each and everyone who's trying to start his vision therapy practice. Why? Because currently, as I see in India, the number of practitioners for vision therapy is very limited, limited to approx 6 to 7 only. So,
Yeah.
can you imagine a large number of patients waiting just for 6 to 7 number of optometrists? We need to build an army, and I am very much happy to support each and everyone who has the endeavor to do and go to the specialty.
Okay, great. So what will happen is we are also putting up the feedback form. So if they are interested, probably they can put up on the feedback form, and also they can contact you or us at the same time. So thank you very much, Puneet. I think we have almost answered all the questions, and we have cleared most of the doubts by the participants. Thank you for taking out your time and talking to us on a very brief note about amblyopia and vision therapy specifically for amblyopia. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Puneet.
so much, sir.
Again,
Thank
and
you so much.
thank you for your valuable inputs and thoughts. So see, I'll just share my screen now, Puneet. So I'm just wanting to share the screen and let everyone know that what do we have for tomorrow's session. Yeah,
Even I am
tomorrow,
excited.
yeah. Okay, so this is a routine. So yeah, so
Yeah.
tomorrow we have a session on progressive lenses again, but this time we have Optom Murtaza Ibrahim. He is going to talk about progressive lenses, but he is going to talk about the latest advancements and the different latest progressive lenses available. So not the basics what we have covered. This is going to be more on to the latest advancements in progressive lenses. He has a vast experience in dispensing. So see you all tomorrow. The timings are 4 p.m. in the afternoon Indian time and 6:30 p.m. In the evening for Malaysian time. I hope everyone can join and have a fruitful learning session. Until then, stay home, stay safe. See you all again tomorrow. Bye-bye.